Hit record. Okay, well, let's get started. For those of you who have joined us, thank you. I know we're going to have a smaller group today because everybody knows this is being recorded. And so welcome to our official first event for the NIGP Mentorship Facebook group. We're going to be doing a number of these over time. And so we appreciate you helping us get started. Certainly appreciate the panel helping us get started. Today's session is on the value of mentorship. For some of you, this is going to be a review. For some of you watching, hopefully this will be new information as you've joined the Facebook group, probably been invited by somebody to join. So we're super excited that you're going on this journey with us. And this session is just intended to give you a quick recap of some key information about the program, but also just to have a conversation with our panel and any of the attendees on your own experiences in mentorship, either as a mentor or a mentee. So to get started, I'd actually like to have everybody introduce themselves real quick. My name's Marquita Gillespie. I've been in procurement for a number of years in lots of different roles and have the pleasure of continuing to help in the profession, even though I retired 2 years ago, which means now I get to do all the fun stuff I like doing and don't have to mess with the stuff that I don't like doing. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-facilitator, Keith, to introduce himself. If you don't know Keith.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Keith Glatz, and I'm the Purchasing and Contracts Manager at the City of Tamarack. I do still have a day job, and it keeps me pretty busy, but I've been around the public procurement arena since dirt was clean, and very fortunate today to have a very distinguished panel with us. And I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves at this point.
I guess it's going to start with me. My name is Sylvester Donaldson. I am the Procurement and Contracts Manager here at Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. Just started, was formerly the Chief Procurement Officer in the County of Santa Barbara. I think I'm right behind Keith in saying I've been in procurement since dirt was clean, probably since your fossils were alive. So I'm pretty, I've been here for quite a bit involved in procurement. I want to say thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Erin Edwards. I'm with St. Johns County. I've been in public procurement for a little over 2 years now. I came from a state college for the state of Florida, and then prior to that, I had been an inventory control manager in a local retail grocery chain for almost 15 years. So welcome, and thank you for having me.
Okay, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Key. I'm currently with the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia. It is amazing. Been doing procurement now for 15 years. Feels like I started yesterday, so that's a good thing, I think. I hope. Either that or I've lost my mind, but either way, it's a super fun journey. And I'm super excited to be a part of this committee and a part of this panel because mentorship is what has gotten me this far.
And Christy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Varda. I work for Frederick County Public Schools in Winchester, Virginia, the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. I've been in procurement almost 10 years, but I've been on the other side of procurement. I've been the vendor actually selling to government at one point. So, you know, I kind of understand both sides of our worlds. So it gives me a different experience, a different exposure to the procurement world. And I wanted to be part of this mentorship group just simply because, you know, I sought out mentors in my past, and you know, some of them were successful, some of them weren't. So, you know, I want to be able to help others to grow in procurement and as professionals. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we're all here as well. We've had a little bit of a journey here. We actually started thinking about this group about was it 2 or 3 years ago when we all were visiting in Salt Lake City, Utah, and this actually came out of the Young Professionals group. We had some discussions at one of their events, and we saw a great need to develop some sort of a program for mentorship within NIGP. And we also had taken We also had taken a survey and found out that there were several individuals that wanted the exchange of knowledge that we could obtain through a mentorship program. A little bit about our purpose. We actually designed the program to support the growth and development of our NIGP members and other public sector, public procurement professionals as well. We didn't want to just keep it to NIGP if we're in the public sector. And the idea is we were trying to create a methodology for us to create a strong professional networks for our mentees and mentors. We want to promote diversity of thought and critical thinking skills. We definitely want to provide some coaching experience and tools, provide some supplemental learning channels, which we're already starting to see on our Facebook page. We want to provide access to seasoned procurement professionals and promote an environment where the learner actually feels empowered, confident, and at the end of the day, equipped to perform. So that's the general purpose, and the objectives we have to support that is we're going to try to grow and develop our procurement professionals and help our agency members as well as our individuals to sustain staff through the development of new and less senior staff in their own organizations. I also want to encourage programs that are going to attract onboard and support and retain new employees into the procurement field, and we feel that mentorship page will certainly help us to attract brand new people into the profession and get them started the right way. And with that, we hope to be able to enhance their job performance while at the same time closing any skill gaps that they find they have when they come into the profession. We also have another goal of developing proficient leaders for our agencies and for NIGP and its chapters. So we're hoping to glean new leaders for our organization as well as to help you become, if you're a mentee, a better leader in your own organization. And part of that process, we're going to advise you on professional development opportunities, which have already come about. Some of these sessions are results of that. And we also want to be sure that we're aligning what we're trying to do with the Pathways learning content to help you to be able to understand what is required to meet the pathway requirements and perhaps what you need to do. And I think we're going to be seeing part of that occur in the very, very near future, as beginning of January, we'll actually have our famous Dave Nash and his question of the day, providing questions on the CPP certification. And he's also a little bit of plug now. Dave's also going to be providing some commentary and leading us through a session in a few weeks on the value of certification as well. And we also hope to use this program to help to provide opportunities for you to share your expertise for both the mentors, and we believe that everybody learns from everybody else, from the mentees as well. Because I've never taught a class, for instance, where I haven't come away from learning something. I learned something today. I found out if you press down the space bar on your keyboard during a Zoom meeting, even if you're muted, you can be heard. So you hear new things every day from everywhere. So I'm going to let Marquita talk a little bit here. If you want to review some of the matching training requirements and activities.
So, one of the things as a committee that we talked about early on is, how are we going to launch the program? How are we going to get started? And we had some initial thoughts, and I think those are changing over time because of the level of interest and the level of engagement. And so where we're at now with the wild success of the Facebook group is reframing the approach a little bit and really starting to engage all of you who have expressed interest in the program in helping us to frame that and move that. So we need to finalize the questionnaire and matching process. Qualifications really NIGP member, obviously, because this is the NIGP mentorship program. But beyond that, there's no set of qualifications you need to have to be part of this. I think starting off will allow folks to self-identify as wanting to be a mentor versus a mentee. But really, I think that's going to evolve. And as Keith was saying about our own lifelong learning, I always consider myself a mentee to someone or some group of mentors that I have, no matter how long I've been in the business. So allowing flexibility will be really important to us, but we want to finalize the questionnaire so that people can proceed into a matching process, and then we can fine-tune that formula of how we're going to take and match people up. And we did talk early on about different ways of moving forward. Do we do a one-on-one? Do we do a group? And how do we allow people to move in and out of relationships? So we're going to get to a place where we will settle upon an approach, but I think all of us are really mindful about wanting to be flexible and adapt to the needs of this group. We as a committee might think, oh, this will be a good approach. And then the community might say, well, no, really, we need it to be a little different. And so we want to meet the need of the community and be flexible enough to allow for the variations that may exist. We'll establish timelines. Initially, we had talked about a 6-month, maybe a year relationship, but we realized there are some folks who are going to want a mentor-mentee relationship for a shorter period of time, maybe for a particular project you're working on or a particular role, or maybe just a particularly difficult time you're going through and you need that relationship more formalized. So we'll have those flexibilities built into the program, and we will also provide some training, because we want to make sure that as you engage with the NIGP mentorship program, that there are some standard expectations that you have and there's consistent delivery. We're all different human beings, right? But we do want some standardization in the expectations people have stepping in and out of those roles. And then we'll want to do some assessments. So as you have your experience in your partnering, we want to get that feedback from the mentor and mentee. What worked well, what needs to be modified, and then constantly have those improvements folded into the program so that the program is dynamic and responsive to those experiences. So fairly soon, we're going to be regrouping with the committee and beginning to establish our next steps. And we will absolutely be reaching out to the community that's already formulated. And so expect that we may tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we'd like you to be part of this aspect of review and feedback. And we would really welcome your input in those kinds of roles. So with that, I'm going to stop share because we'll come back to this later and bring back the smiling faces. And if you just joined, we are recording, so we know a lot of people are going to be watching this afterwards. So, but for those of you who are on now, we want this to be a conversation. This is not a formal webinar. This is not a structured dialogue where just the panel speaks, but Keith and I have a few questions that we're going to toss out to each of the panelists, and really then after they respond, we just want anybody who has some observation or follow-up question to jump on in. So I'll kick it off, and I'm going to start off with Christy. So Christy, you know, I don't like the word mistakes, but we've all made missteps in our careers, right? Whether our career started a month ago or like Keith and Sylvester said 100 years ago, right? So somewhere along our journey, we did things that like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best approach or the best decision. So as you think on your career so far, Christine, I love that you've got the private and the public sector role, so you can kind of speak to both of those. What did you learn from those missteps?
Well, you know, just like so many people, I fell into procurement. I mean, literally, I was I was part of one of those many people that got laid off in 2008 and then went through a series of layoffs until 2011. So, and my background is actually in biotechnology and pre-veterinary medicine. So obviously procurement is not something I even knew about. And when I stumbled upon it for working as a contractor at one point, I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. But I think the biggest mistake, and I do consider it kind of a mistake in some ways, is not understanding my value and not asking for what I was worth in that first procurement position I took. Because, you know, when you come into government positions, many times, you know, you're locked in at whatever you're going to make or whatever your role is. And so not understanding my value and not understanding what I could ask for when going into that role in regards to compensation and duties and things like that really seemed to initially limit me on where my career path went. Fortunately, I was working for an organization at the time that had a lot of opportunities, if nothing else, for my own personal development. And that led me to being able to take the role that I have now, which surprisingly enough, even though I went to a smaller jurisdiction, was a promotion and a raise. You know, who would have thought? And so that has led me to other things. And then my experiences through then growing to become an NIGP instructor has also led me to be able to open other doors. But I think the biggest thing I did was I didn't understand my value at first. I was just looking for a steady paycheck when I took that first job, and I didn't care what I got paid as long as I could pay my bills. And I think I kind of did myself a disservice to some point in my career by not asking for what I was really worth.
That's an awesome observation, Christy. I think when we're able to kind of self-reflect and not be critical of ourselves, but be critical of ourselves, because we really have to acknowledge where we could do things different or where we can improve, because it doesn't always sink in when other people share those observations. So we really have to be open to that ourselves. And I think that's so key in a mentoring relationship. You can hear people say things, but if you're not willing to absorb what they're offering, I think you miss out on opportunities. Curious as to the other panelists on that question, you know, missteps and things you wish you hadn't done or had done that you would do differently, but anything that you guys or even our attendees, any observations?
I can say this. I think that people oftentimes believe that procurement is just one task and we augment and support the entire organization. I think that sometimes people can so locked into, oh, you guys are just going to take care of my contract, take care of my purchase, and we're going to be done with it. However, we augment and help with help develop a vision of the organization. And as Christy said about knowing your worth, it's knowing your role in the process, in the overall goal and the vision of an organization, even your career. What's your career path? What do you aspire to be in the organization? Looking forward to next steps. And I kind of got so locked in trying to do a good job in the job that I had. I didn't take time out to look at where do I want to be? Where am I going? What's my process, my journey? I think that's probably one of the things I missed up at the very beginning of my career in procurement, is not knowing how I can add to the overall value or in the vision of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
This is Rebecca. I'd like to add a couple of things to build off a little bit what Sylvester said, and then some things I caught Christy saying. I think that a lot of times in procurement, it's frustrating, and I think and our job can be frustrating sometimes, not in the job itself, but in the lack of respect or validation for the value we bring from the vast majority of our organizations, because they just don't understand. Oftentimes, whether it's a pocket of the organization, whether it's the leadership, whether it's this department that we're getting frustrated with, and having those mentors, having that network of folks to stand up and say, you are appreciated. Man, that was hard. Kudos to you for getting that done. I've been trying to do that for X number of years. Sometimes you just need that sort of lift. And Christy said, you know, these opportunities opened for her. No, they didn't. Christy opened those opportunities. I've seen her work hard. Opportunities did not open for Christy. Christy made opportunity for herself through her hard work. And I hope and I think with a network of people that bonded very quickly and really supported each other. And sometimes in a mentor, it's not necessarily always telling you where to go or where to be. Sometimes it's just helping you get through today.
Very true.
Great point.
This is Erin. I think for me, one of the mistakes I made was not having a mentor early enough in my career. I was well into management and retail before I found a mentor, and I had quite a few in retail that helped guided me, that knew my dreams were to leave retail. And then I found mentors at the college that knew I wanted to continue my growth, which ended up in procurement for that reason. I, like Sylvester, had no idea what procurement was at one point. I knew what purchasing was. I had done purchasing. I knew what inventory control management was, but I didn't know about procurement. I think if I had, the earliest mistake would be is that I didn't surround myself around people that could help me grow early in my career, when, you know, starting out at 16 to my late 20s. And I think that made once I found that, it made the positive difference that I needed to be able to continue with my career path.
Awesome. And I'm going to call out Victor because I know he's so shy, but he was commenting that there are no mistakes. That's why I was like, I don't like the word mistake, but his point of learning and mentoring opportunities. So Victor, how about you? Any opportunities that you had?
Well, let's just say we're all human. We all make mistakes. And I had the pleasure of one of my first bosses in procurement that anytime anybody made a mistake, you weren't called out on the carpet in front of everyone. We would have a group meeting and the boss would say, when we do this, let's make sure we do this. And it was just a learning opportunity for everyone. And I really consider him more of a mentor than a boss, because I had my share of mistakes, but I truly had my share of learning opportunities that, instead of rubbing my nose in it and putting me in the corner, it's acknowledging something happened, but let's learn from this and not shame anybody.
Yes, I love that. And we used to do that all the time in my agency as well. It's, you know, sharing with your peers what you experienced, and not just what you might have done differently, but maybe situations where the entity could do something different. You know, same with our customers, right? It's not our customer did something wrong. It's, here's what happened with the customer. What can we do collectively to help them not repeat that? So I think we take that experience and push it out to all of our relationships, and it might have occurred over here, but maybe this could also be improved over in this area. So I love that. And I was fortunate too. I had a boss who was my mentor and really actually helped me get involved in NIGP. So those are really key relationships that we're going to talk about. Keith, what about you? I'm going to toss it over to you for the next question. You're on mute.
You're still on mute.
I was trying to use that space bar. It wasn't quite working right. And then I guess I had to be on the page to be able to do it. I believe that, you know, if you're talking about mistakes, one of the things that I probably learned early, I grew up in procurement in a different era. Let me just put it this way. On the first day at the office, there was quite a clatter of noise because of all the staff members working on their typewriters. So I'm that old. And back in those days, we had some different ideas about what procurement was supposed to be. This was probably back in the procurement police days when we were looked at in that regard. And what I regret is that I didn't look at myself as a more strategic cog in the wheel, because at that time it wasn't the way you looked at procurement. Procurement was completely a support function in those days. And I think I would have been a little bit better off if I had been able to look at myself as a strategic cog, and eventually came to that point, but it took a while. So having said that, I think I'm going to ask a question of Erin, if she's ready here.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to ask you, what advice would you give to someone just starting out?
You know, so for me, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. And I will also reflect on what Christy said earlier, is that sometimes you don't know your own value, and people for me, my mentor saw something in me that helped me grow, both not only professionally, but also personally. They spent time with me. And once I started realizing that I just needed to ask certain questions, and it started the conversation for me in reference to what I wanted to do, how I wanted to get there. And they instilled different things in me to be able to get to where I'm at today in procurement. So I would say 100% research. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Reach out to those that, I mean, I've only been in procurement for over 2 years, but most of the people on this panel have been there for multiple years. Reach out to the resources that you can potentially find to help you grow, both professionally and personally, no matter what kind of growth you're looking for.
You're muted, Keith.
Keith, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Keith.
I wonder if there's anybody else that has comments on this. Yeah, they're blowing the grass outside the door. So that's, I'm trying to deal with that at the same time. But I can see that Christy has something that she wants to say about this.
Well, and she, you know, Erin had some good points about personal growth and having somebody that helps you grow both as a professional and as personal. And I will say I had that at you know, the beginnings of it there at my first procurement position. And it was kind of great because we got to do the lovely little test where you find out where you're an ESTJ or whatever it is. And you know, I have historically been polar opposite of everybody I work with. Obviously emotional intelligence is something that I struggled with for a long time. But the nice thing about having that and having somebody that was willing to say, hey, take this, let's see where you're at, is it allowed me to see places that I could grow. And that didn't help me on a professional level, it helped me on a personal level too. Because at that time I had a teenage girl. And if anybody has teenage girls as a female, you know, that can be a challenge. You know, I had a brand new marriage. I was just remarried. So, oh, even better, my mother-in-law lives with me. So I have all of these challenges, but thankfully, because I was able to recognize areas in my emotional intelligence that I needed to work on, it helped me both at work, although I still struggle with the fact that I get a military tone of voice with people and they don't like it. But it is one of those, you know, it's one of those things, but it's helped me grow in multiple ways. And, you know, and like I said, I am the first, I mean, people that have taken my classes that I've taught, you know, I am the first to commend the leadership that I had at my first jurisdiction for the things that they taught me and the things that how they allowed me to grow. And most of the time it was just, they let me go. They said, here's what we need you to do. Go do it. If you have any questions, come back and let me know. And they just let me do it. And they let me fail. Sometimes you've got to let people fail or let people make mistakes in order for them to grow.
I have one thing to add to it. Something Victor is saying, Victor just mentioned in the chat box, which is really something that I really try to aspire to do as a manager, and that is to allow for a learning environment and the ability for you to ask not only how we have to do things, but why and its purpose in the task at hand. I think it's really important to allow your team to feel like they're owners and to help them grow and to realize that a mistake isn't fatal. We'll learn from every situation, and that I'm here to help coach you through the process and to support you through the process as you're learning through your own process, because your process maybe enhance the entire process, and not only in the organization, but possibly the entire field of procurement. And I want to encourage us to kind of create a learning environment for each of our organizations, because we're here to advance the profession, but also to create a learning environment so we're all colleagues that are supportive of one another.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in, and I typed this in the box. That's my favorite question, right? Because I never wanted when I had staff, but even now, whether it's a student or a client, I never wanted people to do something just because it was a best practice or because it was the process or the policy that was in place. You really need to understand, because the worst thing is when someone poses a question, whether it's a supplier or a customer, asks the question why, because we know that's their favorite question. Why do I have to do this? Why is that the rule? And then as a staffer to be sitting there going, well, I don't know, it's because it's the rule, is like, oh, that's a train wreck. That's the worst answer ever, right? You never want to say it's because it's the rule or because the state policy says. It's like, well, there has to be a reason. And I think that's where we get really the adoption of support on something from our community, is when we explain. And if we can't explain, then we have a problem, right? And I think that's where we really have to be responsive to those whys. And if we're falling back on that because this is what the board said, because this is, then we've got to really challenge ourselves to say, well, then maybe that's not a good answer to why that we should be changing. Anybody in our audience have any comments on that? What advice would you give? Keith's question was, what advice would you give someone starting out? Anybody in the audience want to answer that one? I can call on someone. His name would be David Nash, but I'm not going to put him on the spot.
You know, it's interesting. One of the things I learned, I made a huge mistake one time. I worked in a machine shop when I got out of high school, and I was operating a drill press. And I had put two pieces of metal together the wrong way. And I had started drilling, and for some reason I stopped. Something made me stop. And I called the supervisor over, and he said, he looked at the thing, he unbolted the pieces from the drill press, huge machine, put them over on the bench, and he started cussing about as much as he ever cussed, a couple of gosh darns or something like that. And he turned around and looked at me and he says, that's what happens when you send a boy to do a man's job. Now I was maybe 19. And I'm like, you know, that's crushing. So I watched him for the next hour. I went away. I got out of his line of sight, and he worked for about an hour and a half on that thing, and he figured out how to fix it. Next morning, we started at 7:30, I think. Next morning, I see him coming out of the office, walking straight toward me. And out in the shop area where everybody could see, he apologized for what he said to me. He said, if anybody was at fault, it was me because I didn't train you properly. And the biggest thing I learned from that is you're never too big to apologize. So I think the thing we have to keep in mind a lot of times is just because you're the boss doesn't mean you can't be wrong. And it takes a big person, I think, to stand up and say, I was wrong, I apologize for what he said was in front of everybody. Called me a boy, you know, during a man's job this morning in front of everybody and apologized. And like, I still think about that. That was 50 some years ago. And I still think about that incident. And I kept that in the back of my mind as I went through my career and dealing with people that I supervised. You know, people make mistakes, and you can't be chewing somebody's head off, because if morale goes south in the office, then where are you? You know, so.
That's awesome. Very impactful. We have a hand raised, and I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Andrea Filial with Loudoun County Public Schools in Northern Virginia. Hi, ladies.
Hey, hello.
I just want to say that I think all of us that have been in the profession a short time or long time, I've actually been in the profession by accident for 22 years. Never dreamed I'd be in purchasing someday, let alone a director. But I think many of us are mentors without even knowing we're mentors. I'm going to call out, Marquita called out Dave Nash, so I'm going to call out Marquita.
Oh.
I've been involved with NIGP for 22 years, and during that time, probably one of the people I've admired the most is Marquita.
Oh.
I always said years ago that someday I want to be like Marquita. Still not there, probably never going to get there, but I do enjoy the trips she takes, so it is all worthwhile. But I think all of us in this profession, we set an example for so many other people without even knowing we're doing it. You know, we've talked about how we impact our organization and our profession. In our organization, people do know if we're doing our jobs, they know who procurement is. They know who the procurement office is. I call it my big marketing campaign. But along with Marquita, there's other names that'll come up and I'm like, oh, wow, I remember when they did such and such, or I took a class with them, or anything like that. So I think the big thing about mentoring is all of you, all of us are mentoring others without even knowing it.
Well, you're very, very kind. Thanks for that. But you're so dead on, or spot on. I think we see so many people in our profession. That's one of the things I have always loved about this organization, because you have almost literally hundreds of people you can observe on a regular basis who are engaged, and you pick up lots of different little things from lots of different people, right? Because we are our own person, but we do model after our environment. You know, you are who you surround yourself with, and I think we're so fortunate in NIGP to be able to surround ourselves with awesome people from all over North America in different agencies and in different roles and different types of personalities and different backgrounds and experiences, and that creates a more diverse mentorship pool that we're able to all draw on, whether we're formal mentor-mentees or not. So great comments. Well, I'll toss out another question. Let me toss one out to Miss Rebecca.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, here it comes. So, and maybe it's a little bit like what we've talked about, but if there's something else on a different perspective you want to offer, Rebecca, if you were just beginning your career and you had it to do all over again, what would you have done differently?
Oh, great question. I think there are a lot of things if I wanted to pick many things, but and little pieces and directions. I could have gotten here quicker, there quicker, but I'm really happy with where I am. And I feel like it took this journey to prepare me for that, the good and the bad. So I'm not sure I would change timelines or, you know, that sort of thing. But I think, and it has been alluded to and discussed a lot in this discussion already, is recognizing the mentorship when folks were trying to mentor me. I love this idea of becoming more formal with our mentorship and making sure that people know where to go and get it. And I think that's a remedy for this. But early on, I remember I have someone who I still consider a mentor, and we're great friends. And when I would ask her a question as my boss, she would never tell me the answer. She would reach behind her. I remember she'd turn back, she would come back with a book, and she'd say, I don't know. Let's see what the law says. Now, I know her, and I know she knew exactly what the law said, but she was teaching me to do this for myself. And I mean, eventually, I'm a little slow sometimes, but I eventually got it. But I think there are so many people in our lives, and particularly in this profession, who are trying to mentor us, who are trying to tell us, and we don't always recognize that. I had a staff member before I took this job who I have a tendency to talk a lot. For those of you who know me, I use a lot of words, and I generally, if someone comes and asks me a question, I try not to just answer the question, but explain how I got to that answer. And I do that for them and for me. If my thinking is wrong, I want them to tell me that they don't understand that or that doesn't make sense, because sometimes my thinking is wrong and there's a better way. But I also want them to understand how I got here, so the next time they have that question, they can come with a recommended answer. And this young woman looked at me and said, yeah, I don't need to know all that. I just want an answer. Oh. So clearly, you know, that's okay. She's not looking for mentorship. She's not looking to grow. She's not looking to understand that. She's just looking to do her job, and that's okay. But it showed me, like, okay, maybe that time is better spent with someone who does want to learn. But I think sometimes we don't recognize when people are subtly trying to help us, and I would open my eyes to that a little more. The first person I worked for has passed away. And he was an amazing human being, and I liked him very much, and he was really my first mentor in procurement. But his style of mentoring was very different, and we were very different individuals. And I think he taught me a lot, but I also think I missed out on a lot because I wasn't paying attention. I didn't recognize that that person was taking me under their wing. So I would definitely be more open to the mentorship opportunities and being a mentee more often.
That's awesome. Great perspective. What about our other panelists? What would you have done different?
I think I would, based off, you know, what Rebecca said, is just being open to change. Sometimes change and opportunities come and you just don't see it. You don't respond to it. You don't see the full picture. And sometimes it's just easier to just be like, okay, I'm going to do what I have to do. But sometimes you just need to ask those questions or to work with whoever you're working with that's trying to help you get an idea of, you know, what you want to do. But also sometimes, I mean, that person could have just had a bad day. So don't give up on somebody just because, I mean, you're going to be able to tell if they want to know or not. But they could have just had a bad day. So for me as a manager, when I was in retail, I would still try to work with these people to try to help them overcome whatever it is that they were trying to get to. So it's just a matter of trying to figure it out.
Christy, Sylvester, Keith, you guys have any observations on this one? Or anyone in our audience?
I think the most important thing that I kind of probably missed the step is probably to be more engaging. I was so singularly focused and so serious as a young person. Mm-hmm. And I think that I didn't truly take the time out to really enjoy and learn and become open. I think that was the most important thing that I kind of missed out on. I was so singularly, I was just a driven new professional, and I just wanted to get it done and just achieve. Then take the opportunity and time to kind of build better relationships and take time to you know, smell the flowers, learn, grow, make a couple missteps. I was my own worst critic. I was so focused and intense. I think that's something that I learned to just, as a professional, as I've grown, is to be able to laugh at my mistakes, learn from them, grow, and realize that nothing's fatal. You know, tomorrow will come. We'll do it all over again. You know, don't be so intensely driven about that for accomplishments that you don't miss the journey itself, that you don't miss. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I will say, and this is something it's kind of directed to anybody who wants to be a mentee or something, don't be afraid to tell a mentor or tell a leader what you need from them. I mean, one of the things I found, you know, because as a leader, you know, we're so used to supervising or leading down, but we also have to talk about leading up, because sometimes you have to lead up and to get that perfect balance as a leader. And one of the things I actually had to do with a previous supervisor is she was notorious for taking things I gave her and just fixing what was wrong with it and then giving it back to say, okay, it's ready to publish. And I said, stop doing that. One day I sat in her cubicle and I said, I need you to stop doing this. I said, someday I want to be in your role and I don't know what you're fixing, so I don't know what to look for. I need you to stop doing that. I appreciate that you're trying to help, no problem, but I need you to stop doing that, because there's no way I can train somebody or train somebody if I don't know what mistakes I'm making. So don't be afraid, even in any kind of time. And I've done that even as I was becoming an instructor. I asked the instructors that I worked with initially, what can I do better? What areas did you see that I can improve on? You know, outside, you've got to not be afraid to ask those questions on what they might see from you, and be open to taking it not as a criticism or something like that, but as advice and trying to help you grow, because you asked that question and you obviously want to grow.
Marquita?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was thinking about a comment that I've often made in my classes when talking to students. And when I was starting out in procurement, I was like a sponge. And I think that's true of a lot of us when we get into a particular position. We just want to absorb everything we can, and asking questions is great. But one of the things I often say in my classes is sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is somebody leads us down to the end of the dock or the end of the pier and pushes us off in the water. And we have to tread water and flail around to keep our head up, to keep breathing. And don't necessarily, the point of this is don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I still maintain that the hardest RFP I ever did was the first one, because I had no idea what I was doing. And now, well, I haven't been a practitioner for a dozen years, but the last time I put an RFP together, it's like, ho hum, where's my template? You know, it's so sometimes we have this fear of doing something, and yet somebody just leads us down to the end of the pier and pushes us in, and we have to flail around and figure out how to breathe. And that's part of being the sponge part of it, I think, is you really learn a lot when the heat's turned up on you sometimes, you know. And of course I had people I could go and ask. I mean, obviously my boss just didn't, you know, let me flail around completely, but that's what it felt like as a young buyer, you know. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And, you know, I was thinking of myself, you know, what would I do differently? I think in my career, you know, we all have those people in our paths who we might try to help gain an appreciation for either the procurement function or us as a profession or professionals, where we invest time and energy in it, and then later on reflect and go, you know, it probably just wasn't worth my time and energy there because that individual didn't want to understand that.
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
did understand it and didn't care. And, you know, myself, I'm always the one that like, oh, I can make sure someone appreciates procurement. I can do this. And to the point where you're beating your head against the wall going,
Yep.
There's some battles you just got to choose not to fight. And
Yeah.
I think that was something that took me a long time, because I would look at it as a failure on my part, especially with some political individuals or high-level executives, where it was my duty to make sure they understood and recognized. And if they didn't, that means I did something wrong, and just kind of acknowledge now later in life that it was just something, it was a wave I needed to ride out and not invest so much energy and concern into that wave. And so that's kind of what I learned, probably way
Yeah,
too
but
late
it didn't
in my
stop.
career.
It didn't stop you. It didn't stop you from doing it the next time, did it?
No, I was ready for the next wave.
No.
You know, you can beat me up on that first wave. I'll get back up on that board. Might take me a little bit longer.
You see somebody that needs guidance and you just can't help it. And sometimes the person isn't ready, or they're not listening, or
And Dave, that's
elsewhere.
Dave, that's a perfect example. When I first started here, you know, I was new. I wasn't from around here. And there was a lot of resistance because I kind of said, well, the new sheriff's in town, and she, you know, and I kind of cracked down some to help. And I wasn't doing it to be malicious. I was doing it to try to keep them out of the local newspaper and such, but they were so used to doing what they wanted to do. And that was 5 years ago. I had my 5-year anniversary at this job on Tuesday, and it's the longest job I've ever had in my life, which is amazing. And the funny thing is I had a meeting this morning, and those same individuals that were so, you know, that didn't understand where I was coming from and were so counter to what I was doing. Do you know, today they asked me, before we have our next meeting, can you bring us stuff? Because we understand and this is my leadership, we understand the whole kind of the bid process and stuff, but we need you to teach us more about what happens after. What happens when things go wrong? What are our rights? What can we do? And they asked me for that. And I'm listening to you, and I'm like, you know, it was an epiphany, because look at how far they've come. When I first started here, they wanted to get rid of me so bad. And now they're asking me, show us what we can do. And I'm like, you know, but it's because I never gave up. I knew that we were doing what we needed to do, trying to do what's best, and you never gave up.
Cool.
Oh, you're on mute.
I remember back in the day, my issue probably when I first started was humility. It was probably, I needed more humility. I caught on to some things before a lot of other people who had been there. And the day that one of them almost came over and threatened to knock my block off, I realized maybe I need to change my approach to things.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was the point where I realized, you know, I need to look at this from another perspective, that my perspective isn't necessarily always the one that's going to be the right one. And you need to have all perspectives, and you need to be able to compromise on something that's going to be workable for the situation, the organization, and whoever your end user is at that particular time. So humility was a big thing for me to learn very quickly in my career. So I'm going to ask another question right now, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask this question, Sylvester.
Yes.
Sylvester, can you tell me what qualities you think you should seek when you're looking for a mentor? What qualities, capabilities, etc., do you think you should look for in a mentor when you're trying to search for one?
I think one, you need to take a self-check, and like you said about humility, and humility, and being able to truly and honestly look at yourself and say, what are the places and spaces I need to have filled? And you look for the aspirational leader to help you build, fill, and then exceed in those areas. I think that that's the most important thing, is that you take a good and honest approach at what you're looking for and making yourself a better person. Then become a better employee, then a better leader, and a better person all around. I think that mentorship is more not only just in your professional career, but also your personal as well. And how do you become a better person? I think that that's ultimately what I look for. I mean, your mentor can be one of your peers. It can be somebody that's at your kid's school. How you can become a better parent. It doesn't necessarily mean it's just professional. It can be on all places and spaces. You can have multiple mentors as well. I pride myself. I'll call my mentors my cabinet, because they're basically telling me, you know, this is your approach. This is how you should do things. I always share things with them. I've shared things that didn't go so well. They give me some honest opinion and feedback. You should have done this. I have a mentor that says, you really should have done this, kind of a mentor. And another mentor is like, why are you feeling sorry for yourself? You learned something. Dust yourself off and get moving and go on to the next adventure. You know, kick yourself in the pants, kind of a mentor, and also a mentor who's supportive and kind of, you know, says, you know, it isn't the end of the world. Coach you through the process, pick you up, and move you forward. You have an emotional support, and you have a really rational, pragmatic mentor as well. So you got to have a balance between the two. I look for all things that make me a better person, you know, as a better father, as a better husband, as a better person overall. That's what I look for in my mentor, making me better.
Do you think if you needed to, you could find characteristics in perhaps one or two mentors, as opposed to just a single mentor, or two or more mentors?
I think I mentioned it before, like you find spaces and places where you need to fill in. And I can be honest and say, I'm still growing, and I will never stop growing. So I'm looking for that in any and every place possible. At one point, I had 6 mentors. I had a mentor that was a chair of arts, liberals, and social sciences at a university. I had a pastor who was a great mentor. I had my old high school coach who was a mentor to me still. I never really lose my mentors. I just accumulate them as I go through life. And I check in with them often. Check in with them often just to bounce things off and tell them how things are going. And eventually they'll say, "Why are you calling me? What do you really need to know? What do you really need? What are you really calling me for?" And I go over the whole spiel, and then they tell me, "Well, you already answered your question. You know the answer. This is the answer. Go with it. Trust your gut. You've gotten this far. Believe in yourself." And sometimes your mentor is there to help you believe in yourself. You don't believe in yourself sometimes. They're your biggest critic and your biggest champion. So, have at it. Accumulate them. Dozens and dozens of mentors if you need to. Whatever makes you better, go for it.
And I like Sylvester's point about it not necessarily being professional. Even if they're in procurement, it doesn't have to be someone who's further along in their career than you are.
Right.
Sometimes I say when new people come along to our staff and they often say, "Well, I'm new, so I don't know that I add anything." You add more than everybody at this table because you have a fresh viewpoint. We all have baggage now. We have blinders on.
True.
So, when I first started, I was I'm not good at saying no. So where I would have to get myself to be stern was this really aggressive state. And I would watch other people who just said no, and nothing changed. They still had grace. They were still great. And I was like, okay, all right, Sylvester, And so I went to those people and watched them and had them give me advice. How do you do this? How do you not get your heart rate and your blood pressure up to say no? Because it was just, it's not one of those things I'm good at. And so finding that person to say, help me with this part that's going to hold me back in my career, because I have to be able to. And they said, look, I don't look at it as saying no. I look at it as educating people. So, that's a pretty simple thing, but I would never have gotten there by myself. And that was not someone who was further along in their career than me. So mentors are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvester reminded me of something that I used to say at the college. When I had allied health students, I was at the college for over 2.5 years. One of the things I would ask them, they'd come out of tests and they'd be like, "Oh, I just don't know." And I'd say, "But what did you learn?" I asked that question over and over again from numerous students. Every time they came to me in reference to something that occurred in the classroom, "But what did you learn?" And then they would reflect on it and they would think about it in reference to what did they learn? Did they miss? If they missed it on a question, that's great. But it made them think. They, like Keith said, it was about critical thinking. I just threw the question out there, "But what did you learn?" Just to see, to make them reflect, to be able to do that.
Awesome.
I think Sylvester makes a good point. You have to look for people that maybe fill in voids. I couldn't help thinking about it when he was talking that years ago. I mean, when I was young in my 20s, I was in the service, and the kind of people who I gravitated toward were people that could speak up, weren't afraid to express an opinion or something like that. And that was like something I couldn't do. So I would see somebody like that and I would gravitate toward that kind of person. And I couldn't help thinking of that because I just saw it a couple of weeks ago, the King's speech, where King George VI has a stutter, and he's going to Geoffrey Rush to teach him how not to stutter. At one point in the movie, he says, "You have a voice." And sometimes it's pulling that voice out, not being afraid to express your opinion. Like, the world isn't going to end. People are either going to accept it or they're not going to accept it. Stop sitting around worrying about, "Oh my God, they're not going to like me because I expressed an opinion." Oh, well, that's on them. That's not on you. And that was a huge thing that I was looking for in people when I was younger.
One of the things back to Rebecca's point earlier about, you know, not needing mentors to be people who have more experience or older or whatever. You know, I always viewed my management team as part of my mentorship circle. And one of the things I think all of us strive to do when we're building teams, and especially peers in a panel or a board, is to get people who are very diverse in thought and background and experience, because, you know, heaven forbid the world experience, you know, 4 Marquitas on a team. That would be a train wreck, you know. So I always wanted people who were making decisions with me to really be different and to be comfortable, and encourage them to be challenging in a respectful way, of course, but challenge the thought, challenge the concept, challenge the approach. Always make sure that we're bringing out the very best in each of our approaches and our thinking and our logic, and balancing that out to say, okay, well, more often than not, we'd settle on something that was not the way one person thought or another, but kind of a collection of what everybody, and that, you know, that synergy, I think, is what always made it so enjoyable with those teams over the years, different people, but especially the last team that I worked with, because I think we were all very comfortable with one another and could say, all right, and they never hesitated. Marquita, we hear what you're saying, and we hear the passion behind it, but here's what we think is missing, or here's where we think there's some opportunity, and always
here's a hole in your thought.
Pardon?
Here's a hole in your thought process.
Yeah, or, you know, even in their own ideas, you know, everybody was bringing their ideas to the table to say, okay, the collection, let's mix it up and see what happens. And that was always way better than what any one of us brought into the room. And so I always appreciated the ability to do that.
I have to agree
it's
with you
been
there.
a great conversation. We have a few more minutes. I'm going to pull back up real quick the slide deck, because Keith and I just wanted to share a couple other things before we let everybody go. You know, we have our page out there, so you're here because you've been on that page, but just wanted to remind everybody that we're always adding, and we want to continue to add. If you've been part of other Facebook groups, you know, there's lots of different things you can do. So we've started out with some things, but we want to continue to build on our use of all of you as resources, and also our use of the resource in Facebook groups. And as you look here, you know, you've probably seen and been part of maybe the discussions, and we love that. Do not expect the committee to be the ones to move content. Jump out there, you know, put your own question. And there have always already been people doing that, and that's outstanding. We also want people to help bring ideas on other events. You know, we started out a few events, and we'll show those in a second, but really want folks to think, hey, you know what would be awesome? We should have a discussion on this. Hey, there's a really cool book that I read, and I really love this book. I'd like to have a discussion about the book. Hey, let's do a watch party. There's a video, and we could do a live watch party and all collectively watch a video, or somebody giving a speech somewhere, whatever it is. But the events page, which you all had to go to get here, will continue to add to that. Obviously, we're continuing to build members. We now have about 319, I think. But also this media right here at the end is where we will store the videos. So this will be the first video that's out there. We will add others, and we'll continue to have different announcements. But under the events page, I also want to make sure for people who are watching this later, who didn't join, that's where you'll get all the information on each of the events. We have another one coming up. It's going to be an awesome discussion about the value of internships. We have a group of panelists who have, whether in their agency or in their chapter, intern programs. And so if you have a program and you want to build upon it, or you've been thinking about it, this will be a great opportunity to talk with that group about the value of internships. And then, as Keith mentioned, Super Dave has got a conversation that he's going to be having on the value of certification. And I believe we'll have some other folks, including some folks from NIGP, who will be available to answer questions specific to the certification program. But it'll be a great opportunity to talk about all certifications of the value of having those. And so we appreciate everybody who leads these conversations. Ignore the created by. That doesn't mean it's my event. It means I just created the event page. But if you go in, it'll have information on what the discussions on each of the events will be about and who's leading them and who the panelists will be. So Keith?
We do have some other opportunities. Here's just a general synopsis of all the opportunities that we have this time. You can attend the events that we're sponsoring, like today's event. Definitely engage in post discussions. A lot of you have already been doing that, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. There's a lot of learning that's occurred on my part just through going through the different discussions that we've had on the site already. So you can lead, host an event. We have an event coming up in a few weeks that Marquita showed to us, that I believe it's the one on internship, that someone in another group had actually come forward to present, and they're going to share some of that same information with us in a few weeks as well. And so it's time to, if you feel comfortable stepping out of your comfort zone, we're going to try to draw you out of it somehow or another anyway, and I think we're already starting to see that. So lead, host an event, if nothing else, post and share information. You see inspirational quotes or memes or questions. A lot of you are already doing that as well. I see quite a few of those, and they're really, I think, enhancing the value of our site. And again, help build the program. Develop a questionnaire, attend training, and evaluation of the program in general. You can help us with that. Here's one to think about: become a mentor or a mentee. We're looking for both, and we understand that many individuals can be both to different people. You can be a mentor and a mentee at the same time. So we're really hoping that everyone on this call today will consider either becoming a mentor or becoming a mentee in the program. And of course, invite others to join. I do want to ask one thing though. When we join the Facebook group, let them know that when they go in, they have some questions we need to have answered. A couple of simple questions. Are you a member of NIGP or the public procurement profession? Why do you want to come to the mentoring page? What do you hope to get out of it? And at the end of the day, do you want to be a mentor or mentee? And 3 questions, or 3 simple questions, but we really need everybody to answer those questions before we add them to the page. So we've had a few that have been on hold because of that. So whenever you invite someone yourself, please let them know that they have a couple of questions they need to answer as well. So those are the general opportunities, and I want to thank everybody for coming in today. It was a small group, but it was certainly an active group and very insightful as well. And I want to thank all the panelists today. Thank you for joining us as panelists, and those of you that were observing, thank you for being with us as well.
Thanks everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks. Cool.